The story shared by Anael. My family and I moved to Miramontes around 1986 because the earthquake of 85 had wreaked havoc on the building where we lived, and we almost died crushed. Before officially moving into the house, my dad asked me to accompany him one Sunday to see the new house. He gladly accepted because, for an 8-year-old girl, seeing a new house was quite exciting. We arrived, and he told me he would be right back since he had to find out where the store was. He told him not to leave me alone because, for some reason, the house scared me, especially the dining room. This place, for no apparent reason, made me feel dizzy. In the end, my dad left, and I stayed watching TV, but I wasn't really paying much attention. He stood by the door, just in case a witch or a ghost appeared, or at least that's what I thought back then. A few minutes passed, and I began to feel like I was being watched. Besides, inside the house, I felt cold, even though it was sweltering outside. I can't remember much more from that day. We eventually moved into the house, and although you might not believe it, there was a sort of mist inside, though no one mentioned anything about it. Over time, I would wake up at who knows what hour, and I remember my curtain was very thin, and the moonlight shone through clearly. When this happened, I would stare at the ceiling and walls and wouldn't respond. I wasn't really thinking about anything until one day, I swear I saw a woman passing through my wall. She wore a sort of shawl-like dress, and her hair was very long. I watched as this figure moved from one end to the other. It terrified me because I had never seen anything like it. I ended up curling up and fell asleep, but I didn't tell anyone about it. I don't know how much time passed, but on another occasion, I woke up startled, and my breathing was very rapid, which was very strange for an 8-year-old. I couldn't tell anyone about it. I tried to calm myself, wanted to scream but couldn't. Then I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't respond. So I began to pray, and gradually everything settled. Once I could move and calm down a bit, I started hearing a man murmuring in the dining room. It was a deep voice that resonated. I honestly couldn't believe I was hearing it, so I sat at the edge of the bed and stayed still without breathing. I thought that if someone spoke, I could hear the conversation better. I barely managed to distinguish the voice of a woman, and it seemed she was drinking. Suddenly, something slammed on the table, and then the most terrifying moment of my life happened. I could hear footsteps coming up the stairs. An immense terror seized me as I heard each step on the stairs. I thought it was a dream and couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I prayed for mercy. I pressed myself against the wall, continuing to pray, and I swear, I felt someone sitting on the edge of the bed and then lying down. I was crying, feeling an overwhelming cold, as if I were naked in the winter streets. I could even see my breath, the mist that appears in extreme cold. Tears ran down my face, and I felt the bed dip as if someone moved closer to me. Then, another presence lay down as well. I swear I felt their breath on my ear. I don't know if I fainted or what happened, but I didn't wake up until the next day, vividly remembering everything. These events gradually changed me. I was already thin, but I became even more so, with pronounced dark circles under my eyes. I avoided sleeping for fear of waking up to those voices and the footsteps on the stairs. I remember one occasion, sitting on the bed with my mother, asking her if I could finish my homework using the calculator. After much pleading, she agreed. I went downstairs, and while reaching for the calculator, the bathroom door suddenly opened. I turned to see, and there he was, the old man I always heard at night, wearing a hat. I was frozen in shock, and at that moment, I felt a tug on my blouse. I turned to see a woman, only noticing her long hair. She pulled me, and I fell, screaming loudly. This brought my mother rushing down to see what was happening. She asked me what was wrong, but I could barely speak, babbling about a woman while pointing to the bathroom. It wasn't the first time I saw her, as she often appeared around the house, seemingly mocking me. I remember an incident with my mother. I told her to look at a corner because there was a woman laughing at us. My mother said she couldn't see the woman, but she was very scared. Deep down, she knew something was wrong in the house but didn't want to admit it. One time, my younger brother and I decided to sleep together to avoid getting scared. We pushed our twin beds together so that if we got frightened, we could hold each other. One night, we woke up suddenly, unsure of what was happening. We only heard what seemed like a feverish commotion, with voices and laughter echoing around us. He turned to my brother and asked if he heard the same thing, but he was too terrified to respond. His face was filled with fear. He told him not to be scared, even though I felt the same way inside. It sounded like glasses were clinking together, like a toast, and drawers in the kitchen were being opened and closed, along with the clattering of cutlery. It was truly eerie and horrifying. Suddenly, everything fell silent, and we heard footsteps climbing the stairs. My brother and I held each other tightly. In the end, we never knew if whatever it was ended up lying down with us. My brother and I still remember that night, and it seems unbelievable. It appeared that some kind of ghosts lived in our house, but they didn't manifest as dark shadows. The last straw was one day when we were left alone in the house, and I was told that my mother had asked for the lights downstairs to be turned off. He asked if she wanted all the lights turned off because it didn't make sense given what was happening, but I ended up doing it. When I reached the last light, the one at the entrance and near the stairs, something terrified me. As I turned my head towards a wall next to the dining room, I saw that dreadful woman. Her face was the most horrifying thing I had ever seen, like a ghastly apparition. Her hair seemed to float, and her dress was black, with a trace of something too sinister. It was something utterly horrifying and demonic. I screamed like crazy and then climbed the stairs as best as I could. When I saw my mother in the hallway, I told her, almost choking, that the lady in black was in the dining room. My mother kept asking where she was, while my siblings were terrified, and I couldn't even stand up from the fear I felt. One of my brothers went for holy water, and I mustered the courage to go downstairs with my mother. She began sprinkling holy water throughout the house while we prayed the Our Father. That night, I ended up dozing off in my parents' room because I couldn't sleep. It was there that my mother told my father what was happening. She told him that her hair had been pulled so hard that some strands had been torn out. Occasionally, the lights in the rooms would turn off, and her feet would be pulled at night. My siblings had also experienced their hair being pulled and had seen strange things. One of them mentioned that one day, while sitting in the living room, he suddenly saw some dwarves forming a kind of circle dance, singing and jumping hand in hand. My father asked my mother why she had never told him about it. He mentioned that at work, a colleague had read his palm and asked if there were ghosts in his house. My father just laughed it off and said no. However, the woman insisted and told him that there were two entities in the house bothering the family, especially his daughter, which might explain changes like weight loss, sleep disturbances, or lack of appetite. In the end, they talked to her and asked her to come to the house. One Sunday, this woman showed up. She was somewhat strange, with a different aura, and her daughter came along too. He immediately took her by the hand and invited her to play. We went up to my room, and she asked if I could see the people in the house. He answered yes. At that moment, she called out to her mother, saying they were already there. The woman had a censer, candles, and other things I didn't recognize, and then she called me over. Her daughter seemed like an angel to me. She asked me what these people looked like and where they were. He told them everything I knew and saw. The woman explained that these entities were there because a powerful spell had been cast in the house. It seemed they were low astral beings, and the previous owner had given them permission to stay there, inhabiting both the bathroom and a corner of the living room. That's why in those places. It always felt like a freezer. The woman asked for me to be taken out of the room because those entities seemed to want to target me, as they appeared to be very upset. My mother and I left, and I'm not sure how much time passed, but we could only hear them asking for those things to leave the house. It seemed they mistook me for the previous owner because they kept mentioning her name, something we never told the woman when she came to cleanse the house. When we went back inside, the atmosphere felt different, and gradually, the mist and incense smoke from the woman and her daughter dissipated. We never heard anything more about it. Even today, there's something in this house that always makes staying here uncomfortable, all because the previous owner was a witch who liked to connect with beings from the lower astral. Remembering all of this still makes me tremble, and truly, that horrifying woman I saw will never be forgotten.